spinning. All right, we are live with the Americans for Fair Treatment Red Pen Podcast with your two co-hosts, as usual. It's me, Corey DeAngelis, a senior fellow with Americans for Fair Treatment. And then we have the CEO of Americans for Fair Treatment, Chip Rogers. How's it going, Chip?
Corey, I'm doing well, but I understand you're about to head out of country on a little well-deserved time away from the States. Excited for you, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, I figured out we have to do this thing called the baby moons now, not just honeymoons. So yeah, we're going to the south of France. We have a lot of good news, everybody, to go over with you guys today. We will have a special guest, a senator from Iowa, Adrian Dickey. We're going to talk about some public union accountability measures in Iowa and elsewhere. We're going to talk about things like we got the second state that has opted into Trump's school choice program. I didn't have that one on my bingo card, but Kathy Hochul.
Second Democrat governor.
Second Democrat governor. There's been, 200? There's been 28 or so. Yeah, all the Republicans except for one have opted in. But let's just jump into some of the stories right now, Chip. I wanted to get your take on this this headline that I saw today about there's this plan in Washington State. So a lot of crazy things going on in Washington State, but they're sweeping billions of dollars in public employee pension funds to cover apparently some of their things that they're trying to pass this millionaires tax, an income tax in Washington State. I guess they still don't have enough money to cover all the goodies they want to spend money on. So it looks like there's a lawsuit on our hands in Washington State.
Yeah, there is. And this all stems from this just very simple notion that these elected officials in the state of Washington can't find any way to cut waste and any spending out of the state budget because they recognize that spending oftentimes goes to paying off political friends. It goes to building a almost a permanent number of people that will support you because their job relies on that government spending. And that's not really the way it should be in Washington State or in any state. But they have taken a somewhat unique approach here, as opposed to the idea that most reasonable people that balance budgets, most reasonable states, in fact, would do, which is look at where we need to tighten our belt, look at where we need to maybe slow the growth of spending, not actually cut spending, because they never do that. Well, they've decided to raid the pension fund of public sector employees. And so, it's always interesting to me when they think about doing these things because the raid is a one-time thing. The structural imbalance to their state budget seems like it would be a multi-year thing. So I'm not sure who they're going to raid next time. But this idea that you would go to these public sector employees who have worked for decades to help their families for the long term and into retirement, that you would go raid their fund is just disgusting. Now, what they're saying is that there are surplus monies in that fund, but even if that were the case,
it's not their money.
It's still money that belongs to the people who put it there.
Didn't New York City's Mayor Mamdani say something about this in a press conference saying, oh, if Kathy Hochul doesn't give us the money that we're demanding for New York City, we're going to have to raid the pension funds. I think we talked about that on a previous episode too.
Yeah, and it's just shocking that never does it come to their mind to actually cut spending. I mean, just, you can find we hear stories of waste and fraud every single day. I know we're going to have a senator from the good state of Iowa on, and Iowa is a very fiscally responsible state. And he can certainly talk about all the measures that they have to take when they're cutting the budget. I know when I was a lawmaker, I was in a position of influence in our Senate back during 2008, 2009, 2010, when we had the financial meltdown. And I can promise you, we made a lot of significant cuts. And that's what responsible people do, is they cut. They don't go raid the fund of the public sector pension. And so that's what they are doing in Washington. But at the same time, they're sending every major business out of the state. I mean, for goodness sake, Starbucks is leaving Seattle and they're moving to Nashville. It's really a disgrace what the lawmakers are doing in Washington. But hey, the voters have a chance to get rid of them, and they're the ones who put them there. We'll see what happens.
That's right. And there's a couple of measures on the ballot in Washington State that have been following by a group called Let's Go Washington. And they're pretty simple things. One is protecting girls' sports, and the other one is having more transparency for parents in the public school system. And guess what? The teachers union is the main funder of the opposition to those ballot initiatives. So they got the signatures. It's going to be on the ballot in November. The teachers union out there also was the main entity fighting for this income tax as well, or they're at least one of the major ones. They were fighting for an income tax, which I think is unconstitutional in Washington, but they rammed it through anyway.
Yeah, we'll see what the courts say about that. I think you're absolutely right. They don't care, similar to what happened in Virginia with the redistricting. They don't care what the law or the Constitution says. They just do it and let the courts sort it out. And hopefully the courts get this one right. But again, we see the situation, which, you and I have to repeat again and again and again. We love teachers. I'm the son of a public school teacher, a retired public school teacher. We can't stand what their union does with their dues money. That's what this is really all about. I mean, going out and fighting these lawsuits like this has nothing to do with helping teachers at all. And yet they continue to waste billions of dollars across the country on political fights that do nothing to help the teacher.
That reminds me of something that's happening in New York right now, that it's almost like you have to fall off of the cliff in order to get back up. Sometimes things get so bad that people start to wake up. So you've seen teachers leaving the union. We actually have a lot of teachers who have reached out to Americans for Fair Treatment. If you just Googled Americans for Fair Treatment or AFFT opt out, you'll be able to fill out a form. And from what I've seen over the past 6 months or so, about 2,300 or so teachers have contacted us at Americans for Fair Treatment for help with opting out of the union. And this reminds me of a story that I just saw that you were actually interviewed as part of the story at City Journal, Chip, about New York City teachers. They're the teachers unions are so crazy that they're alienating their own teachers. I have one example from this. I actually listened to Randi Weingarten was on the radio there recently, and she said something along the lines, because a teacher called in from New York saying, "Why did you endorse Ma'am Donnie? You guys have gotten so political. I'm not a political person. I just want some help with my union. Why don't you stay out of politics?" And Randi Weingarten gave him a candid answer, which was the first time she ever gave anybody good advice. She said something along the lines of, "Well, if you don't like it, this is all voluntary. You can opt out. You can opt out of the union." And so it's Amen. Like, okay, we should listen to her. So could you tell us a little bit about what the heck's going on in New York and how like a lot of the teachers are even getting turned off by the union leadership?
Yeah, I think it's just really, Corey, a culmination of exactly what you talked about. The leadership in these unions has now become so brazen and so disconnected with the real interests of their own members that they just constantly engage in political fights that have nothing to do with helping teachers, certainly nothing to do with helping children in the classroom. And now when they're called out on it, as you recognized and pointed out with that example, they don't even care. They're just like, you can go ahead and leave. I mean, this is what we're dealing with, people that are so disconnected from the teachers they are supposed to serve. And what we're seeing, and even in a place like New York City that was so far, how can I say this, disconnected from reality, that they elected somebody like Mandami, even those teachers are saying, okay, enough is enough. You've gone too far. And so that's frankly one of the reasons why we at AFFT exist, and that is to help teachers get out of those situations, no longer have their money confiscated from them to be used for these crazy political purposes. But this is just a constant drumbeat. We're hearing this every single day. I mean, it makes for good topics on our show. But at the end of the day, we'd like for these teachers to be helped out. And yet it is so bad that they're even getting out of the New York City Teachers Union. And that's pretty disgraceful. And so, look, I'm going to give the teachers in New York an A+ on this one. And as always, in fact, I'm going to give Randi Weingarten, this may be the only time
Thank you.
I'm going to give her an A for finally speaking the truth that these folks can opt out, but I'll give her an F for what she constantly does on behalf of the unions against her own members.
Yeah, Chip, I think, at some point, it used to be kind of framed like school choice, even a battle between parents and teachers, because people think of teachers unions and teachers as the same thing. But now, it's turning and becoming more obvious that this is a battle not between parents and teachers, but it's a battle between parents and teachers and against the status quo union leadership government monopoly that doesn't treat parents well. It doesn't treat teachers well, where the money's not going to the classroom. It goes towards administrative bloat. It goes towards the superintendents making more than the president of the United States. And I think it's going to get so bad. We're seeing glimpses of this even in Chicago, where, they called school reopenings racist. They called school choice racist. Their own president sends her kid to a private school. They're pushing politics left and right, and they're failing kids academically. And now Chicago voters, for the first time ever, we've seen polling showing that the CTU, the union, is underwater with Chicago voters. And they also endorsed a bunch of people in their primary elections last month, and they lost most of those races, even on the Democrat side. And so many of the Democrats even stopped and said, they didn't even advertise their CTU endorsements this time. And this reminds me of what happened in Texas, where the Republicans, after COVID, they used to get endorsed by the teachers unions, the ones who opposed school choice, for example. It became so toxic, their brand, with Republicans in Texas, that they didn't endorse a single Republican that time. I had, starting in 2022, and I had gone into some of their under their private meetings undercover, and they were telling teachers, members, saying, well, we're going to support these Republicans. We're just not going to do it publicly. We're going to do some private stuff for them. And so that's good news in the future for families. But it's bad news for the teachers union bosses. And it should give them an incentive to say, to self-reflect and say, maybe we should do a better job. Maybe we should focus on member benefits. Maybe we should dedicate more of our money towards representing teachers as opposed towards political activism. And so I think we're about to see a groundswell of support from not just parents, but teachers for reforms.
Well, look, you mentioned Chicago. I want our viewers to think about something. This is a city that is so, yes, they're far left, but so just ingrained in handouts and freebies and nonsensical political promises that just a few years ago, they voted in Brandon Johnson. So we're talking about an electorate that's very far to the left. Even a group that far to the left is so disgusted with this Chicago Teachers Union that they don't support them for how far to the extremes you have to go to get that electorate, the Chicago voting electorate, to be against you. But that's exactly what has happened. And we laugh about this sometimes because it's just comical and painful. But these policies hurt kids. They really hurt kids. And when you're that bad that everybody hates you that much because of what you're doing, if that translates into hurting children, you really just need to get out of the business of education, have nothing to do with it any longer. And I think, Corey, that's a perfect segue to our next story, which I know you'll tee up.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring in Senator Dickey in a second. I just the last thing on Chicago is I wanted to point out that I just saw on social media, this is kind of breaking news, that the House Education Workforce Committee at the congressional level, they're going to hold a hearing pretty soon on, wasting taxpayer resources on failing academic outcomes. They want to talk about parental rights. And they invited the Chicago Public Schools Superintendent, Macklin King, to come testify. And she has repeatedly refused to do so. And so I just saw on social media that their chairman, Tim Walberg, subpoenaed the Chicago Public School Superintendent because she refused to testify at the hearing. It's coming up early June. She makes $380,000 a year, and the school system's failing. So she'd be the perfect person to come testify about failing public school systems. But let's definitely pivot to our next story, which is about this bill that's moving through in Iowa, and it already passed the Iowa House. And we have one of the great senators out of Iowa. It's the Senate File 472. And we're going to bring in our guest now. His name is Senator Adrian Dickey, and he's our special guest for the show today, the Red Pen Podcast, powered by Americans for Fair Treatment. How's it going, Senator Dickey?
It's great. Thank you, Corey. Great to be with you guys.
It's an honor for you to join us today. And I just wanted to give the floor to you. And I want to learn from you, and our listeners do as well, about what exactly is behind this public union reform bill, Senate File 472? Where's it at? What's going on? What's the skinny on it
Sure,
in
thank you.
layman's terms?
Well, and before I get into that, I was wanted to jump in on your comments on teachers unions. This just goes right along with what you're talking about. We had a bill this year in the Iowa Senate and the House that was giving protections to teachers when they were having disciplinary issues in their classroom, where students were being aggressive or even assaulting. And it's passed. It's going to be signed into law by our governor here pretty soon. But it was amazing that every single teacher union, and I think every single lobbyist group except for one that's associated with education was registered against that bill. And this bill was 100% protecting the teachers, giving them some protections that currently aren't available. So take a little sidetrack there, but just sad as to where these unions have gone, and just it's not a fan of the unions to start with, but when they even get away from what they really claim they're trying to do, it's really sad. So
Senator, it's bizarre. I remember a long time ago, you may have this issue in the state of Iowa, but when I was in the Senate in Georgia, I passed a bill called the Grade Integrity Act. It was very simple. It just said if a teacher gives a classroom grade to a student based on what that student earned on a test or assignment or anything, that the administration couldn't override what the teacher did in the classroom. I had the union, the association, the Teachers Association, against me on that bill. And it passed, which is great. But I mean, to your point, you're trying to help the actual teachers, and their union are fighting against you when you're trying to help the teachers.
Yep, sad. Can't make any sense out of it.
I just saw, and I pay a lot of attention, Senator Dickey, to Arizona as well, because they're another state that's kind of gone very far with school choice, for example. And I was watching their bills that passed this year, and the Republicans passed a bill this year to ensure that at least 60% of district funding goes towards the classroom. So things like teacher salaries and other things that would more directly benefit the teacher. And all the Democrats voted it down. It still passed, but I believe Hobbs vetoed it. She's a Democrat governor, and they don't have the override majorities. But it just goes to show you, like, there's all these things like, well, wouldn't you think the teachers union would support something that would benefit the teachers? It's just crazy.
Crazy. Well, thank you for your introduction on this bill. So I guess a little bit of background. Back in 2017, Iowa passed legislation for public sector unions, and was public sector union reform. And it was a very, very heated, probably one of the most talked about votes from the people that are in the Capitol to this day. I mean, it was ugly, just put it politely. And from that, great things have happened, but as most all big bills, there's usually some cleanup, things that take place that you don't see, working the way that they were hopefully intended to work. And so the bill you're talking about today and asked me to come on is a bill to fix a huge component of that bill. One of the problems, I guess, that was found out when that bill was drafted is most of the legislators that were drafting that bill were drafting it from the mindset of probably a private employer, right? And a private employer dealing with a union is very, very, very different than a public employer dealing with a union. And so when you're crafting, one of the biggest things I think we learned from 2017 is when you're crafting legislation, you've got to look at it through the eyes as who's going to be implementing it. And, what we found was most of your public sector unions, since we were talking about schools, we'll kind of stay on that scope. Most of your school administrators started out as being teachers, right? And they were probably union members and somewhat loyal to their union. And as they've progressed and I guess grew in their career into the administrative level, they still have those same loyalties to their union as they did before. And that's a loyalty you probably don't see in most private businesses that a business owner or manager having to a union. Another thing we kind of found out was, again, in a private business, the dollars matter. At the end of the day, a profit matters. The dollars coming in and going out matter. That's not the same necessarily when it comes to the to the public sector, because it's not their money, it's taxpayer money, right? So they're not quite as accountable to those dollars like you are if you're a private business. So when that bill passed in 2017, one of the biggest issues that we found with that was the ability to have the recertification effort of the unions. This bill was not it wasn't an anti-union bill because you don't like unions. It was simply giving the workers the right to vote if they want to certify or recertify in their elections or not. That was it. What we found out was that nearly 50% of the recertification efforts never had the vote. They didn't have the vote because the way the law was implemented, there was no teeth to make them take the vote. And what happened was the employer had to provide a list of their employees when the recertification was coming up. Well, if they didn't provide the list, there was no teeth to make them. And so what we were finding is almost the majority of the time, the public sector employers never turned the list over to the state to then send a notification out to the employees of notifying them of the recertification effort, so it didn't take place. So I would say it's probably 2022. Andy Conlon, a good friend, brought a piece of legislation to me about addressing this issue, and I think it's from the McIntosh Center. Anyway, with some suggestions on how to fix this. I was the chairman of the workforce, or still am, the chairman of the Workforce and Labor Committee in the Iowa Senate, and started digging into the issue, and it was much worse than I even thought it was. So we implemented some legislation to address this, and essentially what we did in 2024 as a first stab at it, that bill I believe was Senate File 2374. What that bill essentially did was, if the recertification process didn't go through as it was supposed to, that the union could be decertified. That the amount of protests in the Capitol was probably nothing greater than what it was in 2017. That was probably the last time we had some that large in the Capitol. I mean, the Teamsters were there. There was an airplane flying around the Capitol for a day with a banner you see at the college football games that said "Kill Senator Dickey's bill." I mean, it was. Whoa. It was pretty crazy. My family business and where I work, we have a trucking company. So the Teamsters were, we've never had any union representation at our business, but they were threatening to come here. I mean, it was pretty ugly. Regardless, we ran the bill in the Senate. I think it was about 8 hours of debate. It was pretty heated, and we passed it. Unfortunately, that year, the House did not move forward with the bill. So it came back 2025, new session, and the bill that we had passed before died, so we had to start all over, and we made some tweaks to the bill. And essentially, the bill does the exact same thing, just goes about it a little differently. This time what it says, and the opposition on the 24 bill was this. It says, well, you're going to eliminate unions when it wasn't their fault to not submit the list. Yeah, you could connect those dots and make that true, but you also know that the list wasn't being submitted because their hands were being held together, and that wasn't it worked out for both sides for that to take place, I guess. So what we did in the bill in 2025 was simply said that if the list was not provided within the state, a writ of mandamus could be filed to compel that public sector union to provide the list to the state or to a board. And And any Iowan could then file a lawsuit against that public sector employer to force them to provide it. And the teeth into the bill that make it work is it says that their legal fees, their attorney costs, etc., will be reimbursed. So at this point now, it'd be very difficult for a public sector union if they don't provide the list. If the employer doesn't provide the list, they will lose in court, and they're going to have to pay the legal expenses of the other party.
So would you say in a tweet form, which I'm doing whenever I look down, that means I'm tweeting something. I'm not
Sure.
that I'm not listening. Would you say that Iowa Teachers Union Accountability Bill requires elections for recertification each year? Is that basically what it's trying to do? Or
okay, so the teachers bill that I talked about originally was not part of this. It was just a separate
union, unions in general. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So whenever their union's vote comes due, and that wasn't touched, that's still in place from 2017. I suppose that could be a 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. Whenever that comes due, they've got to provide a list of the employees to the state, who then sends out the notices to those employees. And if they don't do that, then the legal actions can be taken to compel them to force the public sector to union. I mean, we were finding out, this is how crazy that the union has, what a stronghold they have on this. I'm looking at some notes right here I jotted down. In 2020, 47% of the unions did not have their recertification vote. 47% they're supposed to. The next year was 41%. In 2022 is 56%. 23, 40%. Okay, so it's pretty consistently half the unions never went through the recertification process. They never turned the list in. The year we introduced that bill, the absolutely only change in that dynamic was that bill being introduced and all of the public attention it got. That number went down to 5%, which means year after year after year after year after year, 50% of the time the vote never took place. We introduced a bill, and the next year it goes to 5%. That showed me, I think then I saw that the problem was even bigger than I originally thought, because they have that much of control where they can turn it on and they could turn it off that quickly.
Yeah, Senator, a couple of things come to mind. First, as you well know, a law without any consequences is just a mere suggestion. And in this case, they don't like the suggestion, so they don't do it. The second thing that is so important about this is that we see this all over the country, is that these unions make all sorts of promises as to what they're going to do for the members. And so they don't really want to have a vote, right? Because the members may say, you know what, you promised all this, you didn't deliver on any of it. I don't want to be in this union anymore. I don't want my money being taken out of my paycheck. And so that's why they avoid these at all costs. Flip side of that is it's in the public's best interest to know that, and to the employees that are the union members to know that at least a majority of them want to be part of a union, want to be unionized. And so, if you're a union, you're doing a good job, you're making a difference on behalf of your members, you should have no fear that you're going to have these recertification votes. But they do have a fear because they're not doing their job.
Yep, absolutely. Adding into how they can turn this on and off, prior to us running that legislation in 24, when we started seeing the trend, I suppose is in 2020, 2021, that the votes weren't taking place, the board was called PERB in Iowa that was responsible for these recertification elections. They started sending out show cause action hearings. And the last year we had the data, they sent out 29 notices requiring these public sector employers to come to the state, coming from the PERB board, to explain why they did not submit the list. And of the 29, only one employer showed up. Again, there was no teeth in it. I mean, they were caught, they were called out on it, and they still refused to follow the law. And all we're saying is follow the law. It was simply follow the law. So,
well, great work. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for holding them accountable. And at the end of the day, this is good for the individual worker, who is what we're concerned with, is those individual workers, make sure their rights are protected. And ultimately, it's good for the taxpayers I have my feelings about public sector unions and using taxpayer money to work against the taxpayers many times, but at least they should be held accountable. And you're done.
Absolutely.
You're doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely. I agree. I mean, I had the unions took out billboards and put my face on it, and the airplanes and everything else. And it was amazing how many people reached out to me that were union members, right? And just giving it to me, right? And then I explained to him this, and I agree with you, Chip. I'm not a union fan at all. I don't like the unions. I don't like it's more not so much the unions, it's the big brass part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would rather be paid on my skills and my merits and what I do than what a contract simply says that we all get paid. But these people were reaching out, and I explained to them, this isn't busting your union. This is giving you the ability to vote, to choose whether you want to be in it or not. It's simply that.
It's giving you more power.
That's right. This is an anti-union brass bill, not an anti-union worker bill. And it's kind of like most things. And they never, when they got their email, what it was from their union brass, the full story wasn't presented to them. And once they understood what it was about, I mean, it was a complete 180. No one had an issue with it once they fully understood what the bill was doing and giving them more power.
This reminds okay.
Go ahead, Corey.
This reminds me of what just passed in Florida, right, Chip, where they require a majority of the vote of the members to vote in favor of recertifying the union each year. And didn't we have a lot of AFFT members contacting people saying this is a good idea? And they're people that are part of unions.
Absolutely, because some of those elections, it would be just like two people showing up and voting, yeah, we want to continue, for a union that represented thousands. So it didn't make any sense whatsoever. But, Senator, going back to the messages that you were getting, and you were easily able to flip those around, what does it say about the opposition, or in this case, the union brass, that they must outright lie to their own members to get them to do something?
Absolutely. And we see it all the time on issues outside of this. I mean, they just aren't trustworthy. They're not being truthful to their members on the issues. And, and we see that on all kinds of legislation, even outside of union-based legislation. So many people just read the email that was sent to them on whatever issue without actually looking into it. And as a legislator, I think half the time we spend is countering the untruths and trying to give them the real information as to what the bill was going to do or what the problem was. Yeah. But yes, unions are notorious at doing that. But that's kind of how unions have always been, is from scare tactics and not being trustworthy and misleading, and it's just it's too bad that that's what continues to happen.
So, Senator Dickey, we're coming up towards the end of the show, towards this segment, and I just want to ask one more question that I had, and whatever else you'd like to say to close it out. But I looked up the vote, and it looks like it was pretty overwhelmingly passed in the House, 56-34. Some of the Republicans joined with all the Democrats, but it was pretty overwhelming vote. Was this the same legislature that voted on it the previous year, the same House, or did you get new people, or was there just education that happened and then a lot of people flipped their votes? And
sure.
Also, where do we go from here? Does the Senate look like there's good news in the Senate on the floor? And what are the next steps, I guess?
So when we passed it in 2024 in the Senate, it was party line. As you can expect, the House didn't take it up that year. We ran it in 2025 in the Senate. It was party line passed. The House just passed it a few weeks ago. For the most part, it's party line. I think there's a few Republicans that went against it. But it's passed. It's a bill. It's sitting in front of the governor's desk. I anticipate her signing this into law in the next week. And that chapter will be put to bed, I guess.
Well, on that note, Senator Dickey, thank you for everything that you've done. You are fighting the righteous fight, and send our best regards to your governor. I'm both a friend and a fan, and I've told her many times she needs to be the first female president. I think she prefers being a grandmother, but we do know she's an amazing governor, and we thank her for all she's done.
She's a great governor, and yes, I think she's looking forward to being the full-time grandma and writing out the end of this year. and then looking forward to the next chapter outside of the public service. But I will certainly pass on those regards. And I want to just add one last thing in closing, because a lot of different states legislators have reached out to me on this bill. The biggest thing I can give as advice is kind of what I started out with. Look through it in the eyes in all different angles, because had this bill been looked at, the Chapter 20 bill in 2017 been looked at differently, these issues would probably have been fixed. It's things we've learned, and hopefully other states can maybe learn that and not have those same issues when they move forward with reforms.
Well, we're honored to have you join us today, Senator Adrian Dickey from Iowa. Thanks so much for kind of going over this bill detail, and hopefully some other states can learn from what you guys are doing in Iowa. Thanks for joining the Red Pen Podcast, powered by Americans for Fair Treatment.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Talk to you soon. All right, guys, we have a couple of minutes left for a speed round, a true speed round this week. And there's a lot of good news. There's some bad news in a couple of states, but mostly good. And so let's run through it real quick, Chip. I'm sure everybody saw this, but New York became the second state, Democrat state with a Democrat governor, to opt in to the President Trump's private school choice program, which is a federal tax credit. And just for the listeners and viewers, I'm not going to list the states, but here they are. They're all colored in red. These are states that have opted in or said that they're definitely going to opt in. And there you go. New York, even a Democrat governor, basically saw the writing on the wall.
Again, you and I talk about this constantly, Corey, and every person that I've spoke to about this just shakes their head. How any governor could deny their students this money when their tax-paying residents are paying and getting the credit for it, or getting the tax credits, making the donations. It's just mind-numbing. It's just crazy that they wouldn't take the money. It just shows you how many of them are actually controlled by teachers' unions who do not have the best interest of the students at heart.
Yeah, and I think at some point, look, a lot of people could write off Jared Polis. They were like, oh, he's trying to run as the moderate candidate on the Democrat side in 2028. People like to call him a libertarian. I don't really believe that. But now that Kathy Hochul of New York, in a deeper blue state, is basically has figured out she doesn't want to shoot herself in the foot, and she did it. I think you're going to have more of these dominoes fall. We're seeing cracks in the dam. And just like with the 21 drinking age, which maybe that's not the best analogy because those are public funds tied to that decision through federal highways. These are private charitable contributions. It's a little different, but everybody adopted the 21 age because of that incentive that was baked into the bill. And it didn't happen immediately, but after 4 years, I think Wyoming was the last state to opt in and make that decision. But after 4 years, they all kind of came along. So maybe that'll happen with school choice as well. And one thing that just was breaking on Twitter right before we went live is that the Wyoming Supreme Court just ruled that that there's no longer going to be an injunction on their private school choice program. The teachers union sued. They got a lower court to stop the program in its tracks before it could be rolled out as families were applying. Well, now that rollout can continue because the Wyoming Supreme Court. So this is great news out of Wyoming. Just like in Florida, the teachers unions are suing to end their school choice program. They called it a last resort. They lost in the legislature. They lost at the ballot box. Now they're trying to go in the courts. And their argument is our state has an education clause that says we must have a public school system and therefore we can't have anything else. It's a ridiculous argument. It's what the Idaho Supreme Court said when they ruled unanimously 5-0 a couple months ago to uphold their school choice program. A justice there said, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can have public schools in addition to having choice.
Corey, this is the one that really irritates me. I'm a native Floridian, a resident of Florida. I love my state, and the state has done incredible work, starting way back with Jeb Bush, to show what educational freedom can do for students. And all the data now shows us that both the public sector students and the private sector students all have benefited from this. So every student is benefiting from it. So think about what you must, the hatred you must have in your heart for these students. If you are willing to go to court to dismantle a system where hundreds of thousands of students have said, look, I have a choice between school A and school B, and I'm going to choose school B because it's better for me. And you, as the teachers union, the adults, supposed to be the adults in the room, say, you know what? I hate those kids so much that I'm going to take away what they already have. I'm going to take away what they have chosen is best for them and what their parents have chosen is best for them and force them back into a school that doesn't work for them. I mean, how mean-spirited do you have to be to try to do this? I mean, these people, I've used the term a few times on this show, and I'll use it again. They really are evil. I mean, to do this to children, you got to have some sort of sickness in your head. Like, well, a lot of people send them back to a school that they don't want to go to.
A lot of people kind of credit Florida as leading the way to open the schools during COVID. And a lot of people don't remember that the teachers union out there, the same one who kicked and screamed about the teachers union accountability bill that passed this year with help from Americans for Fair Treatment, they sued to try to stop DeSantis from reopening the schools. And they lost, thankfully. That's the only reason why the Florida schools reopened, because the teachers union's leadership lost out there. And so I think they're going to lose at the Supreme Court here too. They're not going to be able to rip 600,000 scholarships out of the hands of kids using their private school choice program in Florida. So go ahead.
Lose, but Corey, it does speak to who they are as people.
Yeah.
Like, to say that they would want to do this to a child is pretty sickening.
Yeah, you might say, oh, maybe they're doing it knowing they're going to lose and they know they're not. But I don't think anybody files a lawsuit trying to lose. And so if they're playing 4D chess or something, I think it's really a sight to see. But
I can assure you the teachers union does not play 4D chess.
Yeah, exactly. They fight to try to win, even if they've been losing in Florida recently. But so here we go. We have just a couple more we'll hit. We mentioned Washington earlier. I already mentioned this actually at the beginning of the show. Someone who's under investigation for abusing a student. She was just elected the Seattle Education Association president. You just can't make this stuff up. I can't pronounce her name. Yes, Seattle Times said it, so I'm not making it up. The SEA just elected a new president, but she's currently on leave for allegedly abusing kids in the district, and she's a special needs teacher at an elementary school.
Like you said, you can't make it up. We don't even need to make up these stories. They give us such great material for the show.
The headlines write themselves, you could say. Yes. And the last thing I'll point out, I wrote about this at The Spectator. We have a couple other stories, but we're running out of time. So the last story we'll hit on, I think this is a big one. We don't need to spend too much time on it. But Randi Weingarten, I just clipped this video of her, but she admitted that she pressured Target's executives saying, we own 7% of your stock, leveraging pension funds. This is a quote from her, not me. She said she's, quote, using our pension funds to try to actually get these corporations to be far more aligned with workers. The backstory here is that she was unhappy that they didn't come out opposing ICE, immigration enforcement in Minneapolis. And because that corporation, Target, was insufficiently anti-ICE, they didn't say they're pro-ICE, they just didn't come out against them. And she said, well, we're going to use these mafia tactics to try to bully you, and irresponsibly, I'd say this is a breach of fiduciary duties, Chip. It might be illegal. I mean, can she do that? Say that we're just going to pull our pension funds out, even if you're a good investment and great for union members, we're going to pull that money out if you don't go and protest against ICE? That's crazy.
Two things to come to play here. One is I don't think she even has the authority to do that. But number two, she and no union official, no person anywhere should have the authority to do that. These pension funds, retirement funds, whatever form they take, there is a fiduciary responsibility that those who are managing them invest them in vehicles that are for the best return for the members. If you allow even 1 millimeter of separation from that standard, then what you have are people playing politics with other people's retirement money, which is what we led off the show with in the state of Washington. But this idea that a benefits manager or a pension fund manager or anybody that is managing these people's retirement funds would invest in anything other than to maximize return for those members is really scary stuff. She's done and said a lot of stupid things. She needs to walk away from this. She can play games with ICE and all that nonsense, but leave the retirement funds out of it.
Yes, acting like a mob boss, Randy Weingarten, and respect the value of the employees' pensions. So I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys so much. We're going to give an extra special thanks again for our special guest, Senator Adrian Dickey out of Iowa. He gave us a great rundown of the accountability bill that's going on out there. We want to encourage you to follow Americans for Fair Treatment. They're actually on X. It's at Americans Fair. It's also in my Twitter bio. If you want to just look at my bio, you'll see Americans for Fair Treatment. Give us a follow there. Make sure you subscribe to this Red Pen podcast that's put on by Americans for Fair Treatment. Give Chip a follow as well. He's the CEO of Americans for Fair Treatment. You'll find him very easily on X. And until next time, thanks for coming out. One last thing. If you're a teacher, we're on your side as well. You can just Google really quickly. Just type in AFFT opt out. If you want help opting out of the union, there are alternatives. You can still be covered. You won't be, you have a liability. You'll be able to have insurance that's not provided from the union. So just if you want have any questions about how to do that, more people need to leave the union. You have the right to do so, whether you're in a red state or a blue state. So go to AFFT on Google, opt out. It's very easy to do. So thank you guys again for coming out.
Corey, have some wonderful profiteroles when you travel.
That's right. We're going to have fun, but I will still be on social media. Feel free to tag me there and anywhere else. I'm still working. I'll just be on the Riviera in a slightly nicer place. So thank you guys so much for coming out. Thanks, Chip. Great talking to you today.